Hey guys, it's Sam Limon, and in today's tutorial, we're going to be working on our selections and masking exercise. Now, selections and masking are an important and fundamental part of Photoshop and the workflow. So let's just jump right into it. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go into our Schoology folder where you find the link to this video, and you're going to download this file. I've already downloaded it, but you should find it in that folder. And it's going to be named Selections and Masking Zip. So once you go ahead and download it, you might have to click a couple times. It'll go into our downloads folder. You could find it in on your computer, on your desktop, by going to downloads over here on the left. It'll show up Selections and Masking, and then you want to drag it over into your personal folder, your USB drive. So I'm going to drag it in here, close down downloads, and then I'm going to drag it into my fundamentals course. We are working in fundamentals. Drag it inside and bring it in there. Next thing you're going to do is unzip it. So you're just going to double click on selections and masking zip, and it'll give you the blue folder with all of these lovely images inside. Now we also have a folder where you're going to be placing files, and I'll guide you through this. And this is where we're going to place our final files, zip the folder, and submit it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and open up our Kayak JPEG. So look for Kayak. Two ways. You could open up Photoshop and say File Open and navigate to find that file. Or just another way to open up files within your desktop. You could right click on Kayak, Open With, and say Adobe Photoshop. Okay, so first things first, what I like to do usually, I try to make it a habit, but it doesn't always work out, or I don't always remember. But I always try to make a copy of my layer of the image that I'm working on, just in case I mess it up. I could always go back to the original. So I'm going to open up my layers panel first. If you don't remember how to open it, you go to Window and Layers to bring it out. And then we should have this locked background layer, which is our image of this kayaker. We're going to drag this layer down into this square with the plus. That allows us to make a copy of this layer. So now we have a background copy, and I'm going to turn the little eye off on the background, our first layer, so our original one. So now we're working on this layer. Make sure it's selected, not this one, so the top one. Okay, since we're working with selections, we want to go through all of our selection tools, and I'm going to start off with my rectangular marquee tool. If you don't see it, it should be next to the move tool, and if you click and hold, there's going to be other tools. So if somebody was working on another tool before you using the computer, you might see this elliptical marquee tool. Just click and hold, and let's start off with our rectangular marquee tool. And I'm just going to click and drag. So you're just going to follow along with all my steps. What this is it's a selection. So basically, it's an area that we target. That's the bottom line. Now what we do after, we could do anything. We could fill this. We could erase this. We could make a stroke, an outline. We could add to our selection, subtract from our selection. So let's say we want to add to this selection. I have my selection. I could go to Edit, Fill, and under Contents, let's just say white. Click OK. Now we could deselect. We could deselect two ways. I'm used to the old way before this contextual taskbar was implemented not too long ago. But they make it a little bit easier. We could just click deselect, or you could go to select, deselect, or Command D. So I'm a big fan of shortcuts, so I'll do Command D. So now I deselected. So what happened? I was on the background layer, the copy of it. I made a selection and I filled it with white. Now, if we see this image, I just burned that white square or rectangle onto this image based off of that selection. Let's go ahead and undo this. So we could do Edit, Undo, Deselect, or Command Z. Once, that's going to go back and give me my selection. I'm going to undo again. Now I still have my selection, but it removes that area where I filled it with white. I'm going to add a new layer, so I'm going to go to my layers panel, go to the bottom. This time I'm just going to simply click on that square with the plus. That's going to give me a new blank layer. Now if I do edit, fill with white, and I deselect. Now if I select my move tool, I could move this square around because I made it on its own layer. Now going back to selections, I'm going to make another selection with the rectangular marquee tool, and this time I'm going to make a selection within this rectangle, and I'm going to leave a border around here. So now if I make that selection and I press delete on my keyboard, I could delete part of that. Now if I deselect again, now if I move this, I just essentially created that frame. Now let's go ahead and name this layer, layer 1, rectangle. And I'm gonna click on the eye tool to turn it off. Okay, back to our selection tools. Let's go ahead and select our elliptical marquee tool. So I'm gonna select that. I'm gonna drag a circle. And before letting go, I'm going to hold shift. What that does is that constrains it to a perfect circle as opposed to an oval. Now if I let go of the mouse and let go of shift afterwards in that order, I could also add or subtract to these selections. Let me zoom in just a little bit. Now if I hold shift, notice how my icon gets a little plus. It might be hard to tell on the screen, but try it out on yours. You'll get a plus. Now if I click and drag from the outside, I could add to this selection. Let me do this again. Now if I hold Option, that gives me a minus sign. So if I drag going inwards, I could subtract from that shape. And the same thing happens if I click up here onto the on our options bar. I could add to my selection. I could subtract from my selection. But like I said, I'm a fan of making things a little bit quicker, a little bit faster. So just hold Option or Shift. And now let's fill this with something else. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and make a new layer because I'm working on essentially the rectangle layer. So keep in mind, selections is just an area that you target. Now depending on what layer you have selected, that's where you're going to do your next step. So I'm going to make a new layer, layer 1, and I'm going to go to edit, fill. This time I'm going to fill it with black. Say OK. So now we go. Your shape doesn't have to look exactly like mine. I just want to see the practice that you added and subtracted from our selection. Now let's go ahead and deselect. And we're going to name this elliptical. Okay, let's go ahead and turn elliptical off. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. Now the next selection tools here, the single row marquee, single column, they're hardly ever used, but if you ever needed use them, well, I'll just show you one quick thing we could do with them. So I'm going to select my single column marquee tool. They work the same except one's row, one's column. Let's go to column and let's just click on an area. So I'm going to click right here. So what that does is it gives you a selection of 1 pixel wide. And let's go ahead and select our background layer. I'm just going to name this kayak. So rename that. Now make sure that's selected. Now here's a shortcut to make a copy of what you have selected in a new layer. So I have essentially that thin strip of pixels, the mountain, the sky, the water, selected from the kayak layer. If I do Command J, it gives me a copy of that thin 1 pixel strip that was selected. So now if I do Command T, just to make a selection and transform that area that I copied, hold Shift and drag this to the right. Let go of the mouse, let go of Shift, and press return. That is what I get. So let me zoom in just a little bit. So basically grab those pixels and then I stretched it out, so it gave me that. And essentially you could do it from the top to the bottom, the horizontal one, but if you just pick up the top, you're basically going to get the white, the blue, and drag it down in this area. Okay, so let's name that. That was our single column. So let's just name this layer 1 column. Press return, and let's turn that off. Okay, the next selection tool we're going to review is going to be our lasso tool. So if we click on our lasso tool and I make a selection, I'm just going to roughly draw around the kayaker, the paddle, the kayak itself. Very rough. Again, this is just a selection. We're targeting an area. It also depends what layer we're on. Okay, so now that we have our rough selection of our kayaker, keep in mind a selection works in unison with whatever layer you're working on. So if I want to, let's say, delete the kayaker, if I press delete, actually make sure I am selected on my kayak layer. If I press delete, I just erased that portion from this layer. And notice how I have my checkerboard pattern. That means there's empty pixels. There's no pixels in that area. Let's go ahead and undo this. Command Z or Edit Undo to bring it back. Now, so let's go ahead and select our column layer. Turn that on. Now press delete. So now what we did is we essentially created empty pixels on this column layer. So it erased what I had selected. And now we could see the kayaker within that area. Okay, let's go ahead and turn off our column layer. We could also save selections, and that's for any selection. So let's just save this rough selection. In order to do that, we simply go to Select, Save Selection, and we'll give it a name. So I'm just going to name it what it is. So it's a rough lasso tool selection of the kayaker. It's not a clean selection that goes right along the edges where we could, cut the kayaker, place her in another area. So we'll just name it rough lasso selection and say OK. Now I could deselect. And let's say I wanted to get rid of the kayaker and fill this area in with some of the background. So essentially we have an image and we have something that's in the way. Photoshop does a fairly decent job of filling things in like that. So make sure we are on our kayak layer. And we no longer want to do our selection, but we have the selection that we previously made. We could load that selection. Okay, so let's go to Select, Load Selection, and under Channel, we're going to select our rough lasso selection that we had saved. Say OK. And now we're going to fill this in with the Content Aware tool. So let's go to Edit, Fill, and under Content, select Content Aware. Now Photoshop, it's going to do its best to pick up pixels from around the area and fill this in. Make sure your mode is set to normal, opacity 100%. Say OK. And Photoshop, it's doing its thing. There it goes, pretty cool. So now you would also be able to do that same thing. Let's say make a selection, and this might or might not work. So give it a shot. If it doesn't work, don't worry about it. Let me make a selection with the same lasso tool in this area. If you click on Generative Fill, Generate, Again, if this step doesn't work, if it doesn't allow you, don't worry about it. Just skip it. All it does is Photoshop's AI generating something. So it's similar to the content aware, but I say it's a little bit better. The thing is, in class, sometimes we run out of, I guess it's points, the point system that they base it on. So if AI is used too much, then eventually we're out of those points and we can't use it. So, but on your own personal account, if anybody has that, you could play around with it a little bit more. So yeah, so we have that. So now it looks a little bit more seamless. Okay, so let's go back to our layers panel. If you have this, cool. If not, do not worry about it. Let's go ahead and make another copy of that background layer since we already destroyed our kayak layer. I'm going to turn both of these off. Drag my background layer into the new layer icon and turn on this background copy. I'm going to rename it Kayak 2. And now let's go into our polygonal lasso tool. We've already somewhat used, so we'll skip that. Our magnetic lasso tool, let's go ahead and click on that. Now I'm going to go ahead and zoom into the kayaker here. So I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to click on one area, probably right here under the armpit. Click once and then I'm going to slowly drag around the arm. Once you get to a point where you could no longer move, hold your space bar, click with the mouse and drag. Make sure this hand icon stays where you finished last. Make sure you're not way out here in the mountains or something, so go back here, let go, and then just continue. And this makes another rough selection. And if it's not perfect, don't worry about it, and we'll simply just repeat this. And for time's sake, I'm going to skip over the paddle, and I'm just going to go around the boats. You could go over the paddles if you want. Now, once I get to the end, I get that little circle, and I click. Now that made a rough selection of the kayaker. Now let me zoom out a bit. Command minus. Now, if I'm on my Kayak 2 layer, if I do Command J, that's going to make a copy of that selection. I could make my click on my move tool and drag. So now I have that selection. So let's name this layer Lone Kayaker. And let's turn that off. So that was our magnetic lasso tool. Okay, so the selection brush tool. So my understanding, it works a little bit more with AI. And I know some of our computers, most of our computers, we probably can't use AI. So if you happen to use it, practice with it. Simply just click and drag and it'll make a selection. And if I click away, it gives me that selection. So AI could do stuff with it. So try it out. If you do that, try generative fill. If it doesn't work, don't worry about it. Let me deselect. So let's go into the object selection tool now. So that's right over to the right hand side, object selection tool. Let's go to our Kayak 2 layer, make sure we're in the proper layer because I want to select her. And if you hover over, you might see some of this pink area showing, but I'm just going to click and drag and make a rectangle around the kayaker. Now if I let go and give Photoshop a second to think, it's going to detect all the edges. And it gives me a fairly decent selection. So now, if I do Command J here, and I select my move tool. Let's move over here. I have a pretty good selection of her. If I zoom in, we could see it even does a pretty good selection of the hair. Right here, there's a little bit of blue edging right here under this arm. It gets a little choppy here under the boat. We get some of the water, but you know, it's a fairly good one. So if you ever want to make a pretty decent selection, you could use that one. Let's name that Lone Kayaker 2. And turn that off. Okay, now let me show you how to make a selection of a sky. I'm going to click on my move tool. I'm going to go to select, click on sky, make sure I was on my Kayak 2 layer. What that's going to do is that's going to select the sky. I'm going to zoom out so you can see the selection. And we could simply delete that, delete the sky. Now I'm going to deselect, Command or Control D, and I'm going to bring in another image. So I'm going to make a replacement sky. So I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm going to select this Cloudy Sky JPEG. Open it. So now what we could do is bring this from our layers panel, take that background over to our Kayak PSD and drop it in. Now let's drag this layer 1. Let's okay, so let's drag this layer 1 underneath Kayak 2 and let's rename it. So layer 1 is going to be sky. Press return. And now let's resize it to fit in this area. So I'm going to just click on my move tool. That way I don't keep seeing that pink selection. And I'm going to do Command T to transform the sky. And let's just resize it, make it bigger than our canvas here, and move the sky to a position that you like. And once you're happy, press return. And there we have it. So let's go ahead and save this file. Close Kayak PSD. Close Cloudy Sky. And let's go ahead and bring in another image. So since we're on the subject of the sky, let's do a quick sky change on something else. So let's go to File, Open. And we already worked on Kayak. Let's go ahead and open up our lake JPEG. Say Open. Now this one isn't necessarily a selection or masking, but just since we're on the same sky topic, let's go ahead and make a copy of this background. And let's go and turn off the original background. Let's go to Edit, Sky Replacement. And Photoshop has different options here. It'll detect the sky and change it up. So we could click on these different skies. Let's say we want this one. And it does changes to the overall image. Now let's say you want to feather the edge. Or shift the edge. So you could play around with these settings. If you want the temperature a little bit more warm, a little bit more cool. And just say OK. And see, we didn't even need to do a new background because it just adds these colors, all these layers, the shift edge, the image itself. So it gives you a whole group for the sky replacement. So that's pretty neat. Let's go ahead and save this. Command or Control S. Let's save it in our selections and masking final folder. Name it Lake PSD. Make sure format is Photoshop. go ahead and save it. And let's close this. And let's go ahead and go to File, Open, and let's open our beach JPEG. So let's go back to our selections and masking folder, select beach, and say open. Now let's go ahead and zoom in to this area where this young lady is walking on the sand. And let's make a copy of this layer. And let's turn off the background layer. Okay, now let's try another tool. So I'm going to go in to my object selection tool, click and hold, and I'm going to click on my quick selection tool. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. And I'm going to click where her head is and her hair. Click and drag so it detects all the edges pretty good. And then if you notice, the size of my brush is 49. So make sure it fits within that area. Now I'm going to click and drag in the arm here. I'm still missing the hand, so I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. So you could click here where you have this circle and 49. Your numbers might be a little different. If your brush was huge, you want to make it a little bit smaller. Now I'm noticing my brush is not going to fit in that wrist area, so I'm going to go smaller. And the shortcut to make the brush smaller is my left and right bracket keys next to the letter P on my keyboard. I'm going to make it smaller, drag in here, scroll down. I'm going to select the legs and the shoes. Now if you notice, it isn't perfect, so I want to zoom in and make it as close to perfect as I can. Obviously the brush here is a bit too big, so I'm going to make it smaller. Again, it's not going to be perfect. Do the best you could, making your brush bigger or smaller, clicking and dragging. Let's get this area here that it did not select. Now if you notice here in this area, the pixels on this left edge of the leg and on the right edge of the sand, they're very similar, so Photoshop has a hard time detecting that edge. What happens is if you select too much, you could simply hold Option to get that minus, or in our options bar, click on this minus. I like to always have it on the plus. Hold Option and then click and drag to get rid of some of that excess selection. And then I'm going to click to add on areas that I want to add. Hold Option to remove. So this might be a little finicky. Just do the best that you can. So add as you need, subtract as you need. Make your brush bigger or smaller. So take your time with it. That's starting to look fairly decent. I got this bump here. And just go through everything. So that looks pretty good. And so another thing that we could do with our selections is masking. So once you have a selection, instead of filling it like we've been filling with colors, we've been subtracting from them, etc., making copies of things. We could make a copy of her, Command J. We could make a mask. What a mask does is it basically removes the background. So I'm going to click on my layer mask icon down at the bottom of my layers panel, and that masks my subject. So all from a simple selection. So now this looks similar to what we did doing the Command J. However, this keeps the whole image intact. And this is a good segue into masks and what they are and how they work. So let's go ahead and save this. File, save, or save as. Since it hasn't been saved from the very beginning, that's why when you go to File, Save, instead of just saving, it opens up Save As. So it's the same thing as if you do a File, Save As. And we're going to go back into our final files folder, make sure it's a Photoshop file, go ahead and save it and close it. And next, let's continue, or let's start off with layer masks. So let's go to File, Open, and let's open up the Photoshop file that I provided. So let's open up this masking.psd file, say Open, and now if you notice we have two layers. We have a top layer and a bottom layer. Okay, so the reason for these layers is to show you what happens with the layer mask. So a layer mask pretty much just allows us to see different parts of different layers at the same time. Now let's say we wanted to see what's underneath this top layer, but only in certain sections. Your first instinct might be to go to the eraser tool. So I'm going to click on my eraser tool. I'm going to set my brush size to roughly 500 pixels. And I'm going to change the hardness to, let's just go to about 50%. Now, make sure our opacity is 100%. Now if I brush here with my eraser tool, I could see what's happening underneath. I'm going to click on my move tool, move the top layer. So essentially I just put a hole into that top layer that allows me to see what's underneath. Let me go ahead and undo this. Now the problem with this is if we go 50, 100 steps forward and we want to come back and show what's basically where we cut out, this is very destructive, so I won't be able to bring that back. So this is where a mask comes in. So let me undo this, Command Z. Now to add a layer mask to this layer, simply in our layers panel we want to be selected on this top layer. And we add a layer mask at the bottom of the layers panel, which is this black rectangle with the white square icon. So we click on that and we get what's called the layer mask. Now the layer mask is all white, and layer masks work with black, white, or an in-between. And white means it's showing, so that's why nothing changed here. So if I want to change this, I would want to select my brush, click on my brush tool, make sure it's the brush tool. Make sure it's not the mixer brush, the history brush, any of these. Make sure it's just the plain brush. Make sure the layer mask is selected. And let's change our color to black. So right now it's white. To change it to black, we could either click on the white and drag to the bottom left. Make sure you take it all the way to the bottom left, not somewhere here. Or you could click on this little icon at the bottom of the white and black squares. Doesn't matter what color they are. If you click on this, it's going to make them black and white. And then you click on this little arrow to swap them. So now that I have black, I want to make sure I have the same settings. So my brush size at about 500 pixels. Doesn't have to be exact, just somewhere close. And let's take our hardness to about 50%. Opacity 100. Now if we brush, we have the same thing, except if we look at our icon here, we don't have a hole in the image. We have the layer mask that's hiding. And let me click on my move tool, move this around so you can see it's the same exact thing. Let me undo that. So since we are working with black and white, so the way I like to think about this is the white area means the lights are on. That's what we see. The black area means the lights are off. That's what we don't see. So I could go back to my brush tool and I could just do certain areas. So anywhere where I'm painting black, or essentially turning the lights off, is what I'm masking away. It's what is not visible. And if I hold Option and click on my mask itself, I could see that these areas are what's not showing from that layer. So the green is hidden from these spots, and we're seeing what's underneath, which is the blue bottom layer. So hold Option again and click on your layer mask. So that's why we have the blue showing through. Now what happens if this whole layer was painted black? I'm going to make my brush super big and just brush everything. So now this means that the layer mask is fully black, so that layer is on, it's visible, but it's masked, so it's not visible. So that's why we only see the bottom layer. So now if we switch to white and I make my brush smaller, around 500, 600 pixels. Now if we brush, we get the opposite. We're just showing this certain section of the top layer because everything is masked. I'm going to click my move tool. Now I'm only showing this part of that top green layer. And if I hold Option and click on my layer mask, there we have the only area that's showing and everything else is hidden. Hold Option and click again on our layer mask. Okay, so now let's say I wanted to make something semi-transparent. There's two ways we could do this. One way is if I lower my opacity here with my white brush to about 50%. And this is my preferred way, so I'll show you this first. And if I click and drag, I'm painting with white 50%, which is essentially a gray. And I could semi-see the top green layer and semi-see the bottom blue layer. So I'm going to click my move tool and move it around. That way you could see what's happening. Let me undo a bit. I could also click on my white color, choose a gray, and take my, actually go back to my brush, take my opacity up to 100%, brush with that, and now I have the same effect. So either way, but I personally like to stick with black and white and just play around with the opacity. On the same note, let me just go ahead and make a copy of this layer. So I'm going to drag it to make a new layer. Turn off the this bottom layer, bottom top layer, if that makes sense. Leave the mask on. And let's click on the new top layer, right click, and delete the layer mask. So now if you notice, when we added layer mask, and let's go ahead and add one, the mask shows up in all whites. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. If I hold Option while making a new mask, it shows up in black, so it hides it from the very beginning. So then to show, we want to click on our brush tool with white 100%, and we brush. So now be very careful when you're brushing with black or white when you're selecting on a different layer. Let's say I go back to this bottom layer. So let's turn off the top layer, turn on this bottom top layer, click on the layer itself. Now let's say I want to show more of this. So I'm going to paint with white. So I'm going to select my brush, switch to white, and I paint with white because I want to show this section of it. Now I'm brushing, but nothing's happening. If you notice on your icon right here, I'm literally destroying the pixels because I'm brushing white, but I cannot see it because it's masked off with our mask. So if I go over here and I brush here, you notice I'm painting white underneath it. Now go ahead and hold Shift and click on the layer mask. This temporarily hides the layer mask. So now I see that I just painted white over all of this. So just be careful with that. Hold Shift. Now let's say I wanted to hide as well. We're going to leave this as is since we have a copy. We don't need to worry about it. I'm just showing you what to look out for in the future. If I switch it to black, now I'm painting black over here because I want to hide. Well, nothing's happening. If I hold Shift, click on the layer mask, now guess what? I destroyed my pixels here. So always make sure that when you want to do something like that, you have your layer mask selected and you could see a thin black square highlighting it. And now you could brush with your white or with your black to hide. So just something to look out for. It happens all the time. You'll see it. You'll work on something. You'll do that. You'll move on. You know, several steps down the line, and then you'll come back. You'll hide the mask, and then you'll realize you painted on your layer. So Again, be careful with that. Okay, so let's make another layer mask, but this time what we're gonna do, we're gonna turn off this top layer. We're gonna make a copy of the one that we didn't mess up, so this very top one. Make a copy of it, and then we're gonna delete its layer mask. We could also delete the layer mask by clicking the layer mask itself and dragging it to the trash icon. And do we want to apply the mask? I'm gonna say no. I'm just gonna say delete. So that deletes it. If I say apply, what it's gonna do is it's gonna erase the pixels around. And let's turn on that layer. Okay, so now let's create a layer mask. So like we just started, and we're gonna click on our gradient tool. So now our gradient tool, we're gonna click on this area in our options bar, and we're gonna go to basics, and we're gonna click this black to transparent. Or if you have white to transparent, click on the white to transparent. It's basically foreground to transparent. It depends on what color we have. So if I change this to white, it's going to go from white to transparent, but we want to do the black. So we're going to choose black to transparent. So now make sure our opacity is at 100%. We're clicked on our layer mask, and we're going to click from the left hand side all the way to the right hand side. So basically from left edge to right edge. Now what's happening is it's blending it from black, which is hiding. So it's hiding the green on the left hand side, to white, where it's showing it on the right hand side. And in the middle, well, it's somewhere in between. It's kind of like a grayish. So similar to what we did before, the middle is somewhat visible. So now let's select the layer itself, the move tool, and we could see what we have. Let's undo. Let's turn off the bottom layer just so we see. So this top green layer, again, everything on the left is hidden and it's blending up to where it's showing. That's because we went from the black to transparent, which was our original white. Okay, hope that all makes sense. And we're gonna put this into practice with some actual images. So let's go ahead and save this, but let's do a file, save as. And we're gonna put it in our selections and masking final files. So let's go ahead and save it and close it out. Make sure you save it there because we don't want to save over this masking PSD. It doesn't matter, you could always go back to it, but these are just the files that you're going to turn in. I'm going to be opening them up and checking out your layers. Okay, so let's go back into Photoshop. Let's go to File, Open. Go back to your selections and masking folder. You're going to select sweater and tiger, so hold shift and open both of these files at the same time. Okay, so now let's take this image of the tiger and drag it from the layers panel over to the sweater file and drop it in. Now we're going to try to match up the face of the tiger with the face of this young woman, and to do that we have to do Command T to transform it, and let's go ahead and resize it down. So we're kind of guessing right now. Place it here. I'm going to press return or enter, zoom in a little bit, and then I'm going to drop the opacity in the layers panel to about 50% on the tiger. And then I'm going to try to match the eyes. So I'm going to do Command T again and scale it down a little bit more and then rotate it. So I'm going to put my cursor over here on one of the corners, rotate it. It doesn't have to be exact. So somewhere along these lines. Like I said, it doesn't have to be exact. This is just practice. So I'm trying to match the eyes. I could mess with the opacity and see, you know, if the eyes are landing roughly on her eyes. And I'm trying to do the bottom of like the tiger's lip to the bottom of her chin. roughly, and then I'm going to press return when I'm happy with that. Okay, so let's go ahead and add a layer mask to the tiger. So let's select layer 1. Let's actually name it tiger. Press return. Let's close down this tiger JPEG. We no longer need it. And let's save this sweater JPEG as a Photoshop file in our finals file. So let's go to File, Save As. Selections and Masking Final Files folder, and let's name this Sweater Masking. And go ahead and save it. Make sure it's a Photoshop format. Okay, so now let's go ahead and add a mask or layer mask to the tiger. And let's bring in some of the things we just did. So let's start off with the gradient. So let's go to the gradient tool. And we should be on this black to transparent. If it's not, simply click on this drop down, open up the basics, and go to this foreground to transparent selection. And we could swap it to white or black down here. So we want to make sure it's from black to white because we want to hide. So now if we drag from the left to the right, we could start feathering it out. The closer you do it, let's start at the young lady's ear over here, or to the left side of her head, and we could start doing a gradient like that. And there you could see how you start blending it in. We start blending in these images. Okay, so now here's a little trick. Let's say you messed up and you want it to go back to white. We could hold, make sure we're on the layer mask, hold Command and press delete, and this will hide the whole mask. And if we do Option delete, it'll make it all white. So remember those two things. Command delete, Option delete. And we could go the other way if we need to. Play around with this gradient, see how much you could do. You'd go up this way, etc. Eventually we're just hiding everything. So Command, that was Option delete, Command delete. So now let's say we just want to bring in the eyes of the tiger. We could select our brush. Always make sure we're selected on the layer mask. Select our brush with white, 100% opacity, and let's make our brush a little bit smaller. So we could brush the eyes here. And I get it, it's a funny subject, funny looking thing, but it's just to show you the capabilities of masks. So now let's say we want to blend this out. Well, we're at 100% opacity. If we drop this to, let's say like a 30%, let's change the hardness to a 0. That way it feathers out a little bit better. And let's make our brush size a little bit bigger. We could see how we start bringing in a little bit more of that tiger. Now obviously if we do it at 100%, well, we're going to bring everything in. And we could come in and do this. We could just trace over the whole face. So that's how we show and hide with something a little bit more practical, more of what you really want to do. Let's make a copy of this tiger layer. Hide the first one. Now let's do, let's fill it in here, or let's fill it in with black. So Command delete. Okay, now let's say we just want to bring in a certain area. This is where we could start implementing selections. So let's say I want to just select her face, and this is going to be a rough selection, but I'm going to go to my quick selection tool, as opposed to working with the brush. Make this brush a little bit bigger, and let's just select her face. It's not really selecting that well because we're on the tiger layer, so let me deselect, Command D. Select the background layer. Now we could start making a selection. And then, I'm going to subtract the hair here. Subtract the hair. Again, very rough. Let's add this in, add a little bit more here. So we have this selection. Now, if I select the layer mask on the one we just did, and press Option Delete, it's going to fill it with white. So now it filled in my selection, and I could deselect. So it's a little bit sloppy, but now you get the point of where we could start mixing in these selections and bringing things in, as opposed to just using the brush. And now we could further refine it. Let's say we want to feather out these edges. Well, we have different ways to do it. A mask is editable, so I could go in and select the properties. So go to my properties panel, I could feather this out a bit, and you could start seeing it feather out the selection. Or if I want to do something more manual, I'm going to take the feather down to 0, select the layer mask, select my brush, make sure I have a soft brush, and I'm going to make the size a little smaller, zoom in a bit. I can start manually adding a little bit of that feathering here. So this is where everything starts coming together. Your selections, your brushing, your masking. And this allows us to get rid of that hard edge that we had originally. And if we hold Option again and click on our layer mask, we could also work it like this. Just get rid of that hard edge by feathering. So again, just practice. Hold Option and click on your layer mask, and now we see that feathered image. Now let's say I want to hide, or I want to bring in her eyes. I know that they're not going to match up, but if I turn off the mask, now let's click on our background layer. I'm going to make a quick selection with our quick selection tool, and select her eyes. Hold Shift because I want to add to the selection even though it's far away. And now I could turn on the tiger copy layer, select the mask, and now if I do Command Delete, that's going to delete or hide from this mask. So that means her eyes are showing through. Now I could deselect, and now since I'm hiding the tiger, now I could switch to black. Whoops, make sure I get my brush, not my selection tool, and then I could start brushing and feathering away the eyes a little bit just to bring some of that in. And there we have that. Okay, let's go ahead and save it and close it, and we'll move on to things that are going to be a little more complicated. Just for fun, let's go ahead and open up something that we already worked on. Let's go to File, Open, or click on Open here. And let's select that beach PSD file that we had made. Let's go ahead and say Open. And let's turn on the background layer and turn off the original mask that we had made. Now let's put in some text here that we could put over this young woman's head. So let's click on our type tool, and let's select the font. It doesn't matter which one, but I'm gonna go with Avenir. Should be good if we have Avenir. If not, try Arial or something bold. Avenir Next Heavy. And let's choose something around, let's say 500 points, 500 PT. And let's make sure it's left align and black. Actually, let's make it another color so it stands out, because she's black, so we're gonna put it over her. So let's try red and say OK. Now I'm gonna click once, and lorem ipsum is fine. I'm going to move this up over her head. Zoom in. So now this is where I could make a selection from her to mask this out, for example, to make the P look like it's underneath her. So one thing that you could do is if you hold Command and click on a layer mask, it's going to give you the selection of what is selected there. So now if I click on the lorem ipsum, the text, because I want to create a mask there, since I have this selection, and if I click on the mask, it's going to give me that same mask that it had because it added this selection. But I want to do the opposite. I want to do the inverse. So I could inverse a selection. So I could do Command I. That inverses the selection. If I hold Option and click on the layer mask, that tells me everything that it's hiding from this layer, from the type layer. So basically all I need is that. So even if I was to select a brush with white 100% and I was to brush all of this, it's not going to affect anything. I could, and I'm taking a look here, I could make a selection of all of her right before the letters, and if I do Option Delete and deselect, now I have a brush that is only, or a mask that's only affecting that part. So if I hold Option, that's all it's affecting, and now it looks like it's like she's in front of the letters. So that's something else we could do. And now on that same note of making a selection by holding Command, if I hold Command and I click on the layer itself, let me zoom out just a little bit. If I hold Command and I click on this layer, it's gonna select whatever's in that layer. So since I selected on this background, it gives me a selection of everything. Let me deselect. Now if I hold a selection, if I hold Command on the layer, on the type layer, and click on it, it gives me this selection of the type. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer here. This is a blank layer. Now I'm going to add a mask with this selection. So that gives me a layer mask on this layer with the selection of the type. Now right now there's nothing in that layer, so I can't see anything. It makes no difference. I could turn this off and on, turn the mask off and on, but whatever happens to be in this layer would be masked out by this. So let's make a copy of our background, and I'm going to drag this background to the very top, and I'm going to replace, or actually I'm going to place the mask from this empty layer that we created onto this background copy layer. So we could also move masks, and let's erase this blank layer, so layer 1. So now if I move this layer, I'm going to select my move tool, and I'm going to move it around. That mask is affecting this image. And one thing that you notice is if you move these together, if you move the layer, it moves both the mask and the image together because they're linked. So now if you uncheck this link icon, if I select my layer and move it, I have my type set, or not my type, the mask itself actually. And if I select my layer mask, I now move the mask itself. The image stays in place. So lots of different things. You could start putting this together with certain images, with certain effects, and you could see how masks, selections, all that starts becoming very powerful. Let's go ahead and link these back together, and let's go back to something we've done before. Give it maybe a stroke or an outer glow or a shadow, things like that. So let's double click on the right hand side here to our layers, layer styles. We could give it a stroke, change the color. I'm going to go with the dark blue. I could put it outside. I could add a drop shadow, change your color. See how far out you want it. The angle. So feel free to play around with this, and then we could do a bevel and emboss. You know, we could do like a light blue or something on the light side, a darker blue on the dark side. And there we go. So that's a little bit more practice. So let's save this, close it, and we'll continue with our next images. So we're narrowing it down to our last couple. We already worked on beach. We still got a bear to do, the medieval dress, and yellow coat. So we're gonna go ahead and open up one of those. Let's go to File, Open. And let's go ahead and open up the yellow coat. Say Open. Okay, so on this one, let's go ahead and first make a copy of our layer. So background layer, let's make a copy. Let's turn off our original background layer and let's go ahead and make a selection. So for this, I'm gonna make a selection with my quick selection tool and make my brush size a little bit bigger, around 200. I'm gonna zoom in just a little bit. And I'm gonna start just clicking and dragging along the coat. Up into her face. Make sure you get the shirt, and then we'll start going into the hair a little bit. Let's move this out of the way. So I'm just brushing like in this main bulk of the hair, and notice how it struggles to find the edges of these strands of hair. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna click on our options bar, select and mask. And under this view mode, let's go into onion skin. So now we could see what was selected, what wasn't, and we could control the transparency here. So we could turn it off or slide it to 100%. That shows us what it's not picking up and what it is. And we could do somewhere in between. So I like to leave it at about, 50-ish. Let's go a little bit lower. About 30%. What we want to do now is zoom in a little bit, and we want to click on our refine edge brush tool. So this lets us pick up some of the hairs. Let's change our brush size to roughly like 150 pixels about, and make sure your hardness is set at 0. Now simply we could just start brushing along the lines of these strands of hair where it wasn't picked up, and be sure to not go into this area, like the bulk of it. So go into maybe where we see some of this yellow orange background and just click and start dragging. And if you see it still has some yellow here, you can drag it in a bit. Again, don't go in too much because then it's going to start taking out chunks of the hair that is okay. And if you need to get in tighter areas here, we could make our brush a little bit smaller. And just to give us a check, just to give it a check of where we're at, we could always take our transparency up to 100%, and we could see we're starting to pick up some of these strands. So let's just keep working on this one a bit. So the goal is pick up some of the hair that wasn't selected and get rid of some of the yellow. Now, again, it's not going to be perfect, but try your best. If you notice that you took off a big chunk of hair, for example, I go in here, notice how that shouldn't have been removed. Just go ahead and undo, Command Z, and then just go as far as you need to. And on these hairs, just go ahead and brush over them. So work this area a bit. That's looking pretty good. And if you need to, again, make your brush bigger or smaller depending on what you need, work bigger areas or get into tighter areas, go ahead and do so. Okay, zoom out. So I'm going to say that's pretty good, fairly decent. Hair is always one of the harder things. And then when we go down, output it. What do you want to output it to? You could say a selection, a layer mask. So you could do essentially kill two birds with one stone if you do a layer mask. But I'm just going to do selection, say OK. Now that picked up a selection. Now we could do our layer mask. And we have our layer mask. So let's give it a different color background, something that contrasts with the yellow orange. So let's go with the blue. In order to add a layer that is a solid color, we could go to our adjustment layers, which is this half white, half black circle. Click on it, click on solid color, and let's choose like a darkish blue. Say OK, and let's drag that underneath our subject. And the good thing about these adjustment layers is if we don't like the blue, we could go back and double click on it, on the layer itself, and we could edit the color. So now we could see some areas here where obviously we missed or it picked up some of that orange. That's natural. We could go back and do some adjustments there. Let me actually go into a maybe more like a bluish green, like a teal. Say OK. Now a quick little fix that we could do to get rid of this this yellow, we could make another adjustment layer. So I'm gonna click on making an adjustment layer, do a solid color. This time I'm going to go with black, so all the way to the bottom left. Say OK. And I'm going to mask this. So notice how it automatically gives us a mask. So I'm going to do Command I to inverse the selection. Now I'm going to clip this black solid adjustment layer onto our subject, which is going to be this young lady. Now if we right click on here, on the layer in the gray area, create a clipping mask. Now anything that we do here is only going to affect this background copy layer. And if I select this layer mask, the black on the right, I'm going to select my brush with white, 100% opacity. I could zoom in and I could start painting on the hair. Basically I'm painting over the orange and her hair as well. So again, these are some steps that are a little more advanced. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger to finish this all a little bit more quickly. And now that's getting rid of the of that yellowish, orangish tint on her hair. Now we don't want to go too far in because this is essentially painting over her hair. The good thing is it's not destructive. So I could turn this off and on, and there I have it. Now let's say her hair wasn't black. I could always double click on that and I could sample her hair. So if it was a little bit more grayish, more brownish, I could sample the hair. Again, it's not going to be perfect, but it makes it a big difference when you're on a different colored background. And just to give you a view of, like, let's say if it was a brown hair, this is what I was doing. So I'm painting over all the area, but since it's black hair with black paint on it, we can't really tell. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this one. So file, save as, or save, it's going to take you to a save as. Let's go ahead and put it in our final files folder. Save it as a Photoshop file and close it. Okay, the next one that we're going to do, and I'm going to let you guys practice this one on your own, is going to be the file open, and it's going to be the bear. So I want to see how you guys do on this one, selecting the bear, say open. So I want you to do a similar thing, select the bear, start masking the hair, and give it a different colored background. And then if you need a paint over with some brown or some white, I want to see how you guys do. So this one's on your own. At the end, you're going to save this, the same thing, file, save as. Save it as a Photoshop file. And save it into your final files folder. Photoshop, same name, bear. And so those are the only requirements. Mask it, different colored background. You could bring in a different background if you want, a separate image. You could make it a solid color adjustment layer. And if you need to add color to the hair, go ahead and do so. And lastly, we're going to do some practice with the pen tool. So let's go to File, Open. And we're going to go to our medieval dress and go ahead and open this one. Okay, on this one we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to start using the pen tool to practice to make a selection. So what you want to do first is get the pen tool, which is down here, and it basically makes a path or a shape. We want it to make a path, and then we're going to use that path to create a selection. So make sure in your options you have it set to path, not shape. If you make a shape, you're going to be making basically vector shapes. So we want a vector path. And up here we want to do combine shapes. Now let me zoom in a little bit first. Oops. Zoom in a little bit and explain what happens with the pen tool. So every time you click, it creates a anchor point. Once you go back to where you start, it gives you that little 0 or that closing circle. Now you have a full path. If we would have had this set to shape, it would have given us a color, maybe a stroke, but it's just giving us a path. Let me delete that. So just hit delete on your keyboard. Now, if you start off with a point and then you click and drag, it gives you these handles, which turns it into a curve. So you could kind of see which way the next line is going to go. So you could do this. So essentially it's just practice. So if you pull very little, it gives you small curves. If you do a lot, then it gives you a big curve. And based on that second curve over here, you could see which way it's going to go. So since it's coming in to this anchor point, it'll flow out this way or this way, because this handle is pointing like to the bottom right. So if I go this way, you can see which way it goes. So this one is one of those where I can't really explain much on how to use it. It's just you have to play around with it and get used to it and figure out what it does. Okay. So what we're going to do with that information is now we're going to trace our subject. And again, doesn't have to be perfect. Just get the bulk of the hair here. You don't have to get the strands. We could worry about that after. So you're just going to click and drag. If you get to a point where, like, let's say this is a sharp point and then it goes into the shoulder, just click once and that gives you a sharp point or a sharp anchor point, and then drag around here. Now once we get here and we get these wrinkles on the dress, we're basically going to separate this from the background. So you could skip those if you want, or if you want to be precise, you could follow them exactly. And remember, just like in our practice in the very beginning, we want to be just inside of the area we're trying to select just a little bit, not a lot. We don't want to cut off a lot. We definitely do not want to go out here. So I'm just doing undo. So let's say you mess something up, just undo, Command Z, or edit, undo anchor point, and it takes you back. And zoom in as you need, zoom out as you need. Right there, I'm just adding a point. I'm just going to do this a little quicker. Anytime you mess up, just undo it. So again, do the best you could. Now I'm going to speed this up a bit. Okay, so once you reach the edge over here, it's okay to go past the canvas. Let's go back over here and start it up here. Now I am going to go ahead and select the strings and work around here so that I could show you afterwards to remove the section inside, or these two sections. If you want to cut around and ignore the the strings, it's okay. So remember, if you're just clicking on point and doing that, it's going to come out a little jagged. So that's why I'm clicking and dragging. Even if I make small curves, it makes the job a lot cleaner. See, this is something that I probably would leave out if I was doing this on an actual movie poster. So once you get to the end and you close it here, it'll give you that little circle that tells you it's going to close the shape. Now let's go ahead and zoom out. And we could right click, make selection, and you want to feather the radius. If you don't, it's going to be like a perfect clean cutout, which sometimes that ends up looking a little fake depending on the background that you put in it. The way to make it blend in is to feather out the edge just a little bit. So if we do 1 or 2 pixels, that should be fine. And actually, let's do both options so we could see the difference. Let's go ahead and say 0 pixels. Say OK. And I'm going to do a layer mask here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and make a copy of this layer. This one has no pixel feather. Let's actually name it first. No feather. And let me make a copy. So let's go ahead and drag this whole layer to make a new layer. And this one, let's rename it to 2 pixel feather. Press return, and let's go ahead and right click on the layer mask and delete that layer mask. We're going to make a new one with that 2 pixel feather. So let's go ahead and go to our paths panel. So our working path should still be saved here. So if we select it, we see that thin blue outline. Now we go back to our pen tool, right click, and then we make this a selection. This time we're going to make it a 2 pixel feather as opposed to 0, and go ahead and say OK. So now we have a selection on this, and let's close our paths panel. Let's give it a layer mask. Okay, so now we have both of these. Okay, so one thing I just remembered is I did not do the little shapes here. So let's go ahead and make sure you turn off the 2 pixel feather, do the no feather layer. Let's go ahead and zoom into that area. And remember, when you're making selections, you could also combine selection tools, all that stuff. So I'm going to do the quick selection tool just for fun. Make my brush smaller. Go ahead and select this area. Now you see how it's not as clean as the pen. So this is why I prefer the pen, even though it takes a little bit longer. Hold Option, remove that. Now if I hold Shift and select that, now I have 2 selections. Now if I do zoom out, now typically you would do Option Delete, but let me show you what happens here. If I do Option Delete, it's going to fill this with whatever color I had selected here. Why? Because I'm on the layer. So let me undo that. I want to make sure I'm on the layer mask, Now if I do Option Delete, it's going to fill it with essentially black. So black right there. And that hides that area. So let's deselect. Let's turn on this one, the 2 pixel feather, turn this one off, select the layer mask to that one. Now if I do hold Command and click on the layer mask to this bottom one, now if I happen to do Option Delete, it's going to delete everything but that. That is because I have an inverse mask. So let me undo it. If I do Command Shift I, that inverses the selection. Now if I do Option Delete, it hides that area. So again, Command Shift I is going to do the inverse selection, not to be confused with Command I to inverse a mask. If I do deselect, Command I inverses my my mask. Command Shift I will inverse a selection. Okay, so now that we have both of these, let's go ahead and bring in a background. Let's just use something that we already have. So let's go to File, Open. Let's go ahead and add this cloudy sky image. Let's open that, bring it into this file. Let's put it underneath. Do Command T to resize it, to transform it, and then just scale it up to fill the background. So that gives us a nice poster look. It could be some key arts for like a series or something. Press return and accept it. Okay, so now let's zoom in, and even this still looks a little bit cut out, but if I turn off the 2 pixel feather, turn on this one, the no feather, you could see these edges, how they're nice and sharp and cut out. That wouldn't be the reality. So if we turn this one off and turn on the 2 pixel feather, you could see a little bit of a feather, and it probably needs more just because it's a very sharp image. The cleaner the image, the higher resolution, the more feathering you would add. But again, you don't want to go too far with it. But you could tell how this blends a little bit better than the no feather image. So let's just go ahead and delete the no feather. So let's go ahead and save this. So let's go to File, Save As. And let's go to our final files folder and save it as Medieval Dress PSD. Make sure the format is Photoshop. Go ahead and save it. And we are done. Now we can close this, close this. Let's open up our folder. And we are done. So now what you're going to do is you're going to turn in this whole folder with all these files. So make sure you have your beach file, your bear, which you should have done on your own, the kayak, so it's just practice with selections, the lake, changing the sky, your masking PSD, so more practice, the medieval dress, the sweater masking, and the yellow coat. Okay, so you might notice that my background changed. It's because I updated my computer. One thing I noticed, when you submit files to Schoology, it does not accept files larger than 500 megabytes. So before you submit anything here, we're going to have to break it down and make 2 small files because these files are fairly large. So if I highlight all of these files, and if I see my file size for these 8 documents is 1.3 gigabytes. So if I try to upload all of them at once, it's not going to take them. And even if I compress these, if I make a zip file out of them, it's still bigger than 500 gigabytes. So what I'm going to do is break it down, and this is what you're going to do as well. So I'm just going to select the first 4 files, and notice how it says 720 megabytes. So that should be good enough for one, because it's going to compress it down to under 500. And if I select the last 4, that gives me 312 megabytes. So I could compress those as well, so that's going to be smaller. Or you could also break it down to something a little bit more even. So if I do the first 3, that's 587, and the last 5, That's 445, so that's a little bit closer to middle grounds. So just judge it. So I'm going to select the first three, right click and say compress. So notice that's a 587 megabytes, and we'll see what the zip file for that gives us. So it's going to take a bit. These are large files. So just keep in mind what you compress. That's the first three. And it gives me a file that is 387 megabytes, which is good. So just make sure your zip file is under 500 and you're okay. And then, so we did the first three. Now let's do the next five. That's already 445 megabytes. Yours might be a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on your layers, what you did, etc. So I'm going to right click and compress. So now I'm going to have two files with all my individual files. So we'll give this a second. And now I have a 315 megabyte file. So that is perfect. So they're both under 500. And now you could rename these. So I'm just going to go ahead and highlight the name of this folder, Selections and Masking Final Files, Command C. If it doesn't take when you just click once, give it a second, and it'll let you select the text, or you could right click on a folder or a file, say rename, and you're able to access the file name. Copy that. Now I'm going to go to this archive2, paste it, put a hyphen, and put your last name or your name. So I'm going to say Limon. It doesn't matter what order because I'm going to get all the files regardless. And then I'm going to rename the next one. The same thing, hyphen, Limon, and then I'm going to put it to. And these two files are what you're going to submit. So for that, you just go into your Schoology account. You go into your week 1B, and you're going to submit into this exercise Photoshop selections and masking folder. And we are done with that. So obviously I can't upload because I'm on a teacher account. So you will have the options to upload, and if you need help with any of the uploading, go ahead and call me over and I'll come help out. So I want to thank you for following along, and we'll see you on the next tutorial.